1%. 1% is enough, especially when those 1% are scattered all amongst us, and the arguments that are presented are enough that everyone else realizes, hey, there's a question, and the answer to the question is what? We don't know. But then that 1% is amongst us, and they can answer to the question, or point people at where to go to get the absolute answer to that question. So I say load up the, it's like I know you probably don't have baseball in Iceland, but it's like, if you've got to score 4 runs in baseball, to win the game, it's a really good idea to load up the bases. Of course, you get the runs however you can, but if the bases are loaded first before we go into battle, and see, we can do that because it's not a baseball game, because we can talk about these things amongst each other. So if we can load up the bases, so to speak, just to use baseball as a loose metaphor, if we can load up the bases before we go to battle, before we go to bat, we've stacked the odds in our favor. It can be one swing and the game is over at that point. And see, you're really close because you have all of the circumstances are stacked up for you so that the people have to listen. You could just walk down the street every day, or you could, get out on the corners with leaflets, and you could ask people, some guy walks by who's 18 years old, you'd say, hey, you hold out a leaflet to him, which is 4 paragraphs carefully crafted to answer to this question and any other question. You just say, hey, you, what are your chances of owning a home for less than $100 a month? He's going to start laughing, think you're an idiot, and you thrust a piece of paper in his hand and just let him walk away. You see, and it explains in 4 paragraphs, what mathematically perfected economy is, what true economy is, how this present economy can only fail and produce the very conditions which are the failure now, and how this immediate transformation solves it. And the last line is, share with all your friends. You see, these kinds of efforts get the word out quickly. I can give you an example of it. I was contacted with a fellow who became a very close friend. I'm afraid Patrick is no longer with us, but this fellow Patrick Hedemark had come across my web pages, and he studied them intensely for 6 months before he ever wrote me. And finally he wrote me, and I didn't know who this person was. And his questions were so deep and penetrating, that my immediate reaction was, and I'm not a paranoid person at all, my immediate reaction was CIA, intelligence agency, people. It was as if the CIA, though, might be a fan. That they were asking, hey, is our country really falling apart? We're watching you. Now we have to ask some questions because we think you might be on the right track. We got to find out if you're just as subversive. Anyway, he wrote me a page long, letter, his first letter, and just responding to one of the questions on there is a whole article of my website now about how to determine the value of money or property in mathematically perfected economy. But it turns out this fellow is not CIA. He sells caps on the streets of New York. Now, my website had like 80, 90,000 visitors a month at the time. And he dramatically increased my website traffic by something that you could actually see in my traffic statistics. Every morning when he got up, he took 30 3.5 by 5 index cards, and he wrote at the top, one problem, period, one solution, period, perfecteconomy.com underneath that. And he gave those 30 cards out every day. And I would bet you that my traffic immediately went up 10,000 visitors a month.
Huh? Yeah. Hello, Mike. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Okay.
No, I finished speaking for once. I can't hear some people in the background. I wish I could.
Okay. Perhaps this is a good, way to start to confront a banker, about negotiating about a loan, and preparing that. Well,
I
don't know. Did I tell you that I actually got a promise from the director of Landsbanken, one of the biggest banks, that he would do one interview, like a half-an-hour interview.
Great. That is with you?
Yeah, actually, it was, during shortly after a big protest in front of the bank, we closed the bank. We closed Landsbanken. Just a few groups, with, being loud, and they closed the bank. And we kept it closed for one day. And so he was, when I just, showed up at the desk and I asked for an interview, I was not, hopeful to get it, but his secretary, talked to him, and then suddenly one day called me and said he was ready to give me an interview. I was just asking an interview on behalf of the, protesters.
That's excellent, actually. And I'm thinking out loud. I'm trying to. I'm a different kind of a person. I'm sort of a fighter, a combative person, and and part of that is I've been doing this for over. I was a young man like yourself when I started. I've been actually advocating mathematically perfected economy since I was 16 years old. But you have a your own personal virtues, which might warrant a different approach. And I'm thinking outside the box now. Another thing you could do would be to meet with this other bank that you were talking about, if it is another bank. And you could have more or less an interview with them and record the whole thing. Try to do a quality job of it. Record it, and do it in a very gentlemanly fashion. But in truth, ask them about their position, and get somewhere far down the road as possible without ruffling any feathers at all in the beginning, so that more or less you encourage them to divulge their arguments, their position. Now, one thing that we could do then, in my last radio show, I did a sentence by sentence dissection of Ben Bernanke's recent 60 Minutes interview. So I took that interview, which is 50 minutes or so long, and I made 90 some odd responses to it, each sentence or few sentences, collection of few sentences to it. Now, so when you collect this, hopefully getting at least a good audio channel, we can take it and dissect it like that. We can discuss it amongst ourselves so we can understand, what his foundation is, what the evident strategies are. And after all, they're they're an intermediary bank. They're between the central banking systems of the world and the people. They interface with the people, and they're between a rock and a hard spot. There isn't any plausible path for that bank either. And the bank is probably sensing that one way or another it's over for the bank. They're hoping, and they have to be pleasant with you if they're truly hoping that somehow you're going to work something out. But as we were discussing earlier today, this idea that's recently arising in the world now of austerity is something that, 30, 40 years ago, I was actually laughing about. It's actually the worst thing that a government could do, say in the United Kingdom, for instance, to suddenly propose that, they've accumulated all this falsified indebtedness and multiplied it into terminal falsified indebtedness. And all of a sudden, these bozos, these clowns in government jump up and say, oh, well, what really caused all these problems is we should have been paying this debt off instead of accumulating it. Therefore, we have to pay it off now by fiscal austerity. And a prominent thing which is missing in this proposition is, where's the math? Exactly how do people pay this thing down ever, much less soon enough to save ourselves? Because if you look at the United Kingdom, 50% income taxes and, 20%, taxes on top of that, just on sales, and then you have all these other taxes which come into play when you buy fuel or property taxes, whatever, and you have already reduced the people to barely enough to live on, and all the while that we've come to that point, that terminal point, still to maintain a vital circulation, we are being forced to borrow further debt into circulation on top of what we already can afford to service. And these idiots in government, these co-perpetrators in government, are insisting, oh, what we needed was austerity to pay all this down, you see. And it's growing faster than we can pay it down. It always has been, because it only can. It's growing faster than we can pay it down. They're wrong, wrong, wrong. But where are the arguments? Where is the math? There are none. Nowhere in the world where they're advocating austerity all of a sudden are the arguments. You see, in the United States here, in fact, the opposite is prevailing. They realize that the math won't work, so they're actually reducing taxes or persisting in reduced taxes, is what the recent turn of events in our legislature have amounted to, you see. So austerity is a furtherance of the crimes against the people, and it can't work out. In fact, it immediately pushes the subject populace across the brink of failure into failure, So, and I'm hearing this from people who 2 years ago were prospering and now suddenly are forced with, the question that's been forced upon them is how to even pay their mortgage next month. I mean, it's like night and day, from barely sustainable to absolutely not sustainable to increase the taxes enough to even pretend this lie of austerity might exist without ever providing the math.
Okay. We should probably end this. The owner of the computer needs to go. Or the laptop.
With the laptop, so goes the fate of Iceland then.
Yeah, there we go. But I would be interested to to plan or prepare for meeting with, surprise meeting, with surprise argument, that would be. And record it. I mean, I was actually planning to go there with a recorder, like a dictaphone, and just record the conversation if it would be interesting.